Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to leg 9 of the podcast relay. If I knew then what I know now, really looking forward to today's conversation. We will be being joined by Nathan Atkinson. Nathan is here. He's going to be switching his camera on for us any moment. But thank you for joining us, folks. We are slowly getting through all the different legs of the relay and really enjoying the conversations that we're having along the way. There's some great learning that we're getting. We're getting the opportunity to share lots of different information as we go through every week as well. And we've got the opportunity to really start to build a catalogue of loads of great snippets from the conversations. Liam last week, CEO of Lincoln City, with really great learning moments, and you'll see via the social media we're being able to replay a lot of the great content that we're getting through the course of each of these conversations. So we're in leg 9. Nathan, welcome. Great to have you here as well. So those of you joining, Nathan is the founder of Rethink Food. And a creator of Rethink Food. So I'll let you give your own title in a moment, Nathan. But I know Liam, when he handed over last week, was really sort of excited about the work that you've been doing, the way in which you've reinvented yourself, I guess, over the course of your career to date so far. So ideal opportunity for us to reflect on some of the learnings that you've had along the way. So thank you for being here. And I guess for everyone tuning in, Nathan, one, whereabouts are you? 2, how is lockdown going for you so far? And 3, just a little bit about, the story that got you here.
All right. So thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to come along and share my story today. I'm in Leeds. Lockdown has been intense. As an organisation, we have been able to be very responsive and actually grow as a business and an organization, which is great from a business point of view, but actually it is sad because in so many ways we are dealing to respond to families that are in crisis and people that are very vulnerable. So it's kind of a bit of a difficult place to be, but the time has passed really, really quickly. It has been a very positive time, and the reason for that positive sort of those outcomes has been strategy. Right at the beginning of lockdown, we sat down and we set our stall out of what we were going to do, what we weren't going to do, and how we were going to go about that. So it was very much risk assessing as many different elements as possible. And having that sort of strategic approach from the start has actually led to quite a few successes within the last 15 to 16 weeks.
Great. So we'll get into a little bit more of that as well, because that's going to be really interesting. And your background, before Rethink Food, what was the journey to get here, and then sort of what inspired Rethink Food, and what's the philosophy behind it?
So my background is in education, primary school education, and spent 10 years as a head teacher as part of that journey. And in 2014, I took up a post at an inner city school in Leeds. I always want challenge, and was something that was really important to me, working in vulnerable communities. And in 2014, I got that opportunity. It was a big school, so nearly 700 pupils on roll. It served a community that was in the bottom 2% of deprivation nationally. There were 48 languages spoken in the school. We had a resource provision for children with autism. So in terms of challenge, it most definitely was that. Equally, it was the most amazing, wonderful place to be, but the challenge was actually at times off scale. Early in the leadership there, it became clear to me that a lot of children were arriving at school hungry. One day after a school holidays, we had an incident where our gas had failed in the kitchens, and so we had to give the children sandwiches for their dinner. And the behavior in school that afternoon was really bad.
Right.
Now, one of my beliefs is that all behavior is a form of communication. So rather than shouting at these kids and saying, you're horrible because you've done this, this, and this, I sat down with some and I said, I can't imagine what it must feel like to be so angry that you've done this, this, and this. And it's not acceptable, but what's going on? And one of the older boys stood up and he said, I'll show you. And he pointed to his stomach. He said, it hurts here. But I've had a week off school. And normally on the first day back, you give us a roast dinner, but you gave us sandwiches today. And all I've had is bread and crisps for a week, and I'm hungry. Now, he didn't put it quite as eloquently as that, but his message was that he was hungry. I went back to my office and I wrote the word hunger on my office wall. And I said, I'm going to remove hunger as a barrier to learning. Fast forward 6 years now. The legacy of that moment was the creation of Rethink Food. And I vowed to remove hunger. So rather than championing and telling everybody that this is a mission to feed hungry children, because of the stigma attached to that, because of the pride issues and the sensitivity, we created an organization that its core is to remove hunger, but we do it in an exciting and empowering way. And I think that a lot of that links to my background as an educator, that lots of organizations give food to people and to families. But the point of difference for Rethink is that we educate and empower people to live a food secure life for themselves, to make a difference themselves, so that to move from this dependence to an independent life, and something like that for me is really, really important.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's really great to hear such a clear statement, but also such a values driven approach to things as well. So it'll be great to kind of unpack some of the stuff that that you reflect on in terms of that's helped you, one, take that kind of action, but two, that maybe formed some of such a values based contribution that you're looking to make as well. So no, really fascinating, that hunger piece. There's so much that we do in our work for sort of adults at work and fueling themselves to kind of perform to the best of their ability, that rather than starving themselves through the day and seeing if they can make multi-million-pound decisions accurately. But actually, if we get it back to those habits and relationships with food at school as well, changes the game from a much earlier stage. So no, really fantastic. So if I knew then what I know now is the topic of conversation, when you started playing with that concept, was there something that you went back to early on, or was there a thought that you went back to around, actually, if I knew then what I know now, this, or actually that was useful knowledge that I gained? Where did you go with it, Nathan?
It's quite interesting. I think I was a bit maverick when I first thought about it, and I thought, if I wouldn't want to know anything, because if I did, then it wouldn't have helped me shape the person that I am now. And because I think that everything I've been through has it's been like a toolbox of life. All these experiences have gone into that toolbox, and now is the time to be able to use some of those tools. And I think that was probably a naive way of thinking about it, but the deeper that I thought about that and the more I went into it, I guess it came out that actually it's okay to get stuck, and it's okay to at times make mistakes, and it's okay to be wrong. And so that if I knew that then a lot of the anxieties, a lot of the pressure that I put on myself, to the extent of not living a healthy life and struggling from a mental health point of view, at times probably drinking far too much to find ways of coping with that, when actually if you knew that that was part of a progression in life and was part of a process, I think that would have probably made made a difference. And another thing that, when really reflecting and thinking deeply about it, is the issue of time.
Right.
When I was younger, time was a very limiting factor in my life, and I was very much ruled by time. But equally, from a time perspective, was pace. It was always about what's next, what can I do next, what can I achieve next, and I can even link that into running the London Marathon. I trained really hard, I worked really hard, I became obsessed with the numbers, and I've been coached softly by
Yeah.
somebody around sort of working towards the marathon. And a couple of days before I went down to do it, he said to me, "Don't forget to smell the roses." And that always sticks in my mind. And I use that quite often when I'm sort of coaching people or working with people, because I spent the first 6 miles of the London Marathon being angry that people were in my way. And at no point did I smell the roses. And the intensity of running that marathon and the intensity of the cause, I was running it for a girl who was in the nursery where I was head teacher. She had cancer, and we'd raised money, and the intensity. And I saw my wife at 25 miles, and she shouted to me, "Do it for Chloe." And I just started crying at that point and I was running that fast because I had to achieve this time that was in my mind, and I had to keep pushing on. And I ran the last mile in like 6 minutes of a marathon and I'm not like an elite, well, nowhere near, but for me, that was like a massive achievement. But all that emotional, and then getting to the end and just having just a bit of a crash. And I think that time and that experience could have been far much more enjoyable had I not had that pressure. And I think that going back to sort of work and life, I was a head teacher after 6 years of being a teacher. And that's a pretty rapid sort of rise through to sort of that level of leadership. So going back to time and thinking that things have to happen quickly, and now where I am in sort of my role and sort of my time in life, in being able to think that these things take time. And over the last sort of 3 years of running Rethink, myself and my business partner have developed a saying that good things take time, but more importantly, with time, they get better. And to avoid those sort of intense peaks of work and not striving for things, but just working much more consistently rather than looking for spikes and sort of seeking those things out, because they zap your energy and they'll give you a little lift, but actually can take you away from what your core purpose is and what you're trying to do. So yeah, kind of just
yeah. No, there's some really great stuff to unpick there as well. And when we finish up, we'll talk about playing from the heart, how to win when there's no finish line, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in our new program, which is actually about helping people kind of, go at the right pace rather than always feel like you've got to go faster. And there's some really interesting psychology to that. But in terms of making the mistakes and in terms of the kind of the drive that you've got there, and there's some really interesting stuff to unpick. In terms of the first bit, that sense of, it's okay to make the mistakes, it's okay not to have that straight line of success. What do you think was the role of, who you were trying to impress or who you didn't want to see making you mistakes? Was there a particular kind of reference point there, or was it about not making mistakes for yourself? I'm just interested in a bit of that balance.
I think that there's that desire to achieve and to be able to provide for my family, for my children, for my wife, and to do that, and the success within a family unit. There was never pressure from my family unit to do anything and to be that. There was sort of levels have been set throughout sort of family history of a really strong work ethic and being the best that you can be. And I think that going back to my very first ever job, I had a Saturday job, but I worked in a sports shop for a small family business. And so the importance of that for that family of making their money and being sort of successful meant that we were only one sort of step away from that. And so it was important to be your best. And then my first job after university was working again for a family-owned business, but that was sort of working in sort of quite a high-end sort of spa retreat, and the importance of the customer has to have this best experience. And even now, I will do certain things and think, is it to that level? And we're trying to achieve to that level. So I guess that it's about the work ethic, but nearly everything, all those expectations will have been put there by me, and that sort of fixed mindset of wanting to be able to do that, and I've changed and I've developed, and since coming out of school and working on the Rethink Food has given me that opportunity to sort of to take that off a little bit, particularly around the intensity of it, and take a step back and just be able to see things much more of a slower process rather than that fast pace.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting as well to hear you kind of reflecting upon, you know, personal expectations, but pretty strong sense of responsibility to others, and that feels like a pretty heady mix to kind of, you know, to deal with. Hence, you know, that fear of the mistakes, I guess, and not being able to ease into the learning rather than fearing the mistakes more than celebrating all the learning, whether good, bad, or indifferent. That feels like that, you know, pretty interesting mix.
Yeah, and celebration's quite an important word that you pick up on there, because when you're that focused on that drive and the push and the push and the push, and it's not taking that time to reflect and to recognize the achievements and the things that you have done, because the forward looking and that seeking and that self pressure means that you forget those times, and consciously now try to look back and to celebrate those sort of successes and the great things they've done. But I guess without sort of looking too deeply into my own psychology, is that sometimes there's an element of feeling special, as it's described, that is probably missing from my personality. So being able to celebrate those successes when you can't feel special yourself is a difficult thing to do. So it's always about probably moving on and going, no, you know what, we achieved that, that's great. But actually, when you're leading a team, those celebrations are really important because of other people's sort of individual needs. So making time to celebrate those successes and to celebrate those successes sincerely. I've had to work hard and to make sure that my face is saying as much as the words are as well, so that there's that genuine sincerity. Because if you've just got a tick list that says I have to say well done and congratulations to this person, tick it off, then you might as well not bother saying well done and thanks at all. But I guess that because of personality traits and sometimes things like that are difficult, and when you're working in an organization, you're leading an organization, people skills and relationships with people are so important. And when from my own sort of personality, put me on a stage in front of 1,000 people and I can come alive. Put me in a room one-to-one with a person, I haven't got a clue what I'm going to say to this person, or I can be the most socially awkward and introvert, but I can then when it's the sort of that time to come alive, then it's very different. So people skills and dealing with people, it has been sort of very much a learning process throughout my professional journey.
Yeah, and was there any particular support that you got with that, or insight that you provided that actually was one of those kind of, right, I know that now kind of points? Was there any particular advice or useful stuff that you read that helped with making that shift or feeling more comfortable with that variety of leadership responsibility?
I think going back to being in the classroom as a teacher, and starting to be aware of children's special educational needs, and
Hmm.
particularly looking into like the autistic spectrum, looking at OCD, all these different kind of things. I've got, it's like tick, 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 tick. And when you're thinking about how you're working and how you're shaping things for a child with those learning needs, actually I've learned a lot about myself in that time. And it's not like a self-diagnosis, but the autistic spectrum is this sort of sliding scale, and everybody will be on it at some sort of point with certain traits, and it's seeing those things in myself that has enabled me to understand some of that a little bit better, and then be able to adapt. And I work, as well as doing Rethink Food, within sort of leadership development within education. And quite often when I'm working with middle leaders, talk about when you're a class teacher, you've got 30 children in your class, and you have to have a relationship with those 30 children, and you understand what their needs are. And like I said earlier in the conversation, that all behavior is a form of communication. So
Yeah.
unpicking those elements so that when you become a leader, it's no different from working with your class. You've still got your own class and you're still working with that group of individuals. It's just that now they're adults. And so it's understanding sort of what their needs are and being able to communicate. So some people will be able to read an email that's sort of 2 sides of A4. Some people might need that in sort of half of that space. Other people need you to speak it and to be able to say it. It's about understanding the needs of others and then adapting your communication methods to be able to meet their needs. That said, and this sort of goes back to a learning that you can't always be everything to everybody. So there has to be some sort of minimal expectations, but it's about being able to adapt your message to the different audiences.
Yeah, yeah, that's really powerful. I'm on a bit of a mission that every time OCD is mentioned, I tell people to read Lily Bailey's book, Because We Are Bad, A Girl Lost in Thought, because it demystifies everything to do with OCD and stops people using it inappropriately, because it's one of the 10 most sort of challenging health disorders that anyone can get. It's not being a bit of a neat freak. And so all of that stuff for educationally, when we start seeing kids that really do have that and understand exactly what's going on for them internally, it makes a massive difference. So that's just my read Lily Bailey's book and follow her, and she will re-educate everyone on what OCD actually is. It's really powerful stuff. But I think the other bit that comes out really clearly there, Nathan, is that sense of the leadership responsibility of delivering the message with the audience in mind, rather than delivering it how I'm comfortable delivering it. And kind of what do they need from me, what rather than what do I fancy telling them in what kind of style. And that's a pretty big shift, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not wanting to be a dictator. You're trying to get those people to that common place, and that very much as the message, it's the delivering that message and the content of the message, and making sure that it always goes back to your why. So the whole Simon Sinek of start with why, and making sure that it's that why that drives you. It's not about what you're doing, it's about why you do it. So like with Rethink, we can tell you all the different programs that we do, and that's really exciting. And I could walk into a room and tell people about that, and they'll go away. But the focus in my presentations is why we do it. This is why we're doing it. We're improving outcomes for children, young people, and their families. We're removing hunger as a barrier to learning. And it's about that education and empowerment for those people that is really important. And when you think about all different kind of marketing elements, it's like buying a drill. You don't go out because you're wanting to buy a 6 mm drill. You're going out because you need a hole, and it's the drill bit that's going to get you the hole kind of thing. So it's making sure that you can communicate effectively as well, and using that why as the important driving factor.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that clarity of removing hunger as a barrier, I think, is really interesting, because I'll go back to your marathon now, because I talk to people a lot about outcome hijack. When you're in the here and now and you're hijacked by the finish line that you're desperate to get to, and your every thought is focused on the finish line and getting over it, which is taking away focus from being in the here and now. So given that your marathon one was one where the smelling the roses was difficult, and given Rethink Food has got kind of a remove hunger as a barrier, you know, does that feel like a finish line that we haven't removed hunger yet, we need to get closer to it? Or is it more of a point of arrival that you're excited by seeing how much closer you can get to it each day?
Yeah, this is a piece of work that is going to go on for a long, long time. And a couple of years ago, I was at a networking event. I was sat next to a guy, and he asked me what I did, and I was telling him about it. He said, "That's really interesting." He said, "Let me tell you about a place where they provide food for the families. They even started to offer facilities where they could wash their clothes, and they could do X, Y, and Z. And they had this whole wraparound care." And I was like, "Wow, where's that?" He said, "It's Bradford, and it was in 1930." So that shows that even though we've made progress, there's still an awful long way to go. And the current situation that we find ourselves in now, this crisis, from my point of view, and our perspective as an organisation, the crisis legacy is going to be far harder hitting the families, the vulnerable families, where there's a lot of support out there at the minute. But when everyone goes back to work, when restrictions continue to lift, people are back to work, that a lot of that goodwill and that support is going to disappear, and a lot more families are going to be vulnerable. So this crisis legacy is something that we're really focusing on. But interestingly, we're already looking beyond the crisis legacy to building a brighter future. Mm-hmm. And through education again, and through giving children and young people a voice in this particular time that we're in, we really want to help them work towards build that brighter future. And we're able to do that through the medium of food, and particularly looking at that from an environmental perspective. And again, that sort of outwardly telling people we're doing this to save the planet. What drives us every day is that we're doing it to improve it for children and young people.
Yeah, and so if we go back to some of that, you know, earlier learning, so you as the headmaster and the young boy telling you that his stomach hurt, you know, was there anything there that, you know, you also learned about how you help? And, you know, did that open your mind up to some learning around, you know, direct and indirect? Because it feels like you've got a very holistic picture anyway, but I'm wondering if that sharpened any of that thinking in a particular way back then as well.
Yeah, I guess that when I really unpick things like that, I've always fought for the underdog.
Right.
I've always wanted to do right. And weirdly, I can remember being about 8 years old, and there was a kid in school. He wasn't even in my class, and nobody liked him. And for me, that was gutting. And so when it was Christmas time, I was the only kid in the school that wrote him a Christmas card, because of that empathy and that sort of compassion. And it's like, I want to do that. But that in itself has been a bit of a roller coaster. That what you maybe when it was my first headship, there was it was a smaller school. So each time I sort of progressed, I went to a bigger school. But when I was in that first school, the vulnerability of the children, it was something that I took very personally, and I took home every day, and it weighed on my shoulders. And to the extent that mentally was very, very draining. I took all that baggage on, and I didn't process it, and I wasn't able to let it go. And there wasn't supervision available as there is now in sort of school. So it was very much a very crippling, but I sort of responded to that by tightly trying to sort of control that, and to be able to put things around. And part of my learning is not to do things to people, because I'm doing them to them from my point of reference, from what I think is best. And quite often when we try and improve things for people, it's our learning and our life experiences that have actually shaped that. But actually you need to take a step back and actually understand what those needs are. So an example linked to food is that you think, well, surely you can give your kid a bowl of cereals and a slice of toast at home in the morning. But the answer and the feedback from some of the children is there's no electricity on the meter. How do you keep your milk cold? How do you make toast? And I talk a lot about people living in their own bubbles, and those bubbles are informed by all those experiences. So making sure that you don't put those experiences onto other people, and taking a breath, taking the time, and experience and life skills can help shape that, and not doing to people. So what Rethink doesn't do is push things on people. It doesn't force people into sort of particular pigeonholes. It has a broad and balanced offer. And as a teacher, you'll get learning resources, and they'll say lesson one, week one, 10 minutes talk about this, 20 minutes talk about this. And a lot of people, a lot of teachers grew up with those kind of learning platforms. What we have created is an idea, a point of inspiration, and we say to the teachers, we want you to use this as your point of inspiration to differentiate it to the needs of your school, to the needs of your community. And if it doesn't look like our idea at the start, that's amazing, but please will you tell us what it looked like, so we can then keep feeding that in and building the content, because there's no one set outcome. There will be all kinds of different needs and desires, aspirations, and forcing something on somebody is not the right way to go about it. So try not to restrict things, and not to strangulate things, because that's how I've seen it in my mind. And I think I might have been guilty of that early on in my career, but through maturing and sort of life experiences, it means now that we're in a position to understand the needs, but not to force the outcomes.
Yeah, John Amaechi, who you may have seen a lot of doing some of the anti-racist stuff recently. John gave a good jolt a few weeks ago in one of his bits to camera that he does regularly, where he was sort of talking about the whole premise of treating other people as you'd like to be treated yourself is wrong. Yeah. It's arrogant, it's wrong. Treat people as they would like to be treated, and actually take the time to find that out. And that was a really great framing of what you're talking about there. And I think that's really powerful. And that feels like that kind of moving more and more comfortably into doing the right thing in the right way, rather than you just wanting to do the right thing and make a difference to people. Feels like that was a very important part of the kind of development process. Because I'm also sort of thinking about something you said right early on around kind of how you coped with things, because it really feels like this desire to make a difference, this compassion that you've got, but the drive that you've got, feels like taking care of your mental health is a pretty sort of, important challenge, when there's, maybe all the time you're feeling like there's more to do. I'm not there yet. And that kind of internal urgency, desire to make a difference, but kind of, right, how do you take care of you? Have you learned how to take care of you more in order to keep the energy high?
Yeah, I think rather than when you said how did I cope, I think you should say how I didn't cope. Right. I think to have to go through an experience to be able to look back on it like that is something that's really important. So how did I cope? I obsessively exercised, not a good idea. I can now go out for a run, and I don't have to have a watch on. I don't have to have a device that tells me how far I've gone and how quickly I've done it. I can run freely, and that's really, really important. And that's part of my development and well-being. Probably that you can pick up from sort of the pace of this conversation and some of those experiences. I don't actually have an off switch, which is very hard. And that's really difficult when alcohol becomes a bit of a coping mechanism as well. Thankfully, 2.5 years ago, I switched that off for good. So, but again, that's probably not the right way to approach it, because switching it off is not the right thing. But eventually, being able to be in a position where I can enjoy a glass of wine, a beer, but I'm still not ready for that in terms of that journey, because again, it becomes an obsession and something to focus on, and not a positive way of releasing. So as I can go for a run now without sort of the time and everything, then I'm sure that's part of my recovery and well-being. I'll be able to do the same. But again, sort of there was I had a period of time where I had medication for anxiety and depression, and again, having reassessed and now doing something that is absolutely my passion, and we are controlling the direction. We are sort of setting those expectations and performance levels, and not being judged by an external sort of pressure. It means that all those things have gone away, and I guess that maturity and experience and life experiences have all gone into that. And again, linking into sort of, I think I've mentioned it already, the toolbox of life.
Hmm.
All these experiences and all these moments have helped me have that toolbox, and now to be in a position to know what I'm going to use and when I'm going to use it, but probably most importantly, why you're doing that. And being self-reflective, I'm now being able to take that time and to breathe and to work things through slowly. I just was made aware a couple of weeks ago about a book called How to Be a Craftivist by Sarah Corbett. And this is talking about the art of gentle persuasion. So rather than being a campaigner that's bang, 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 it's about just taking your time. And what the craftivists do is they sort of stitch a lot of their messaging. So whilst you're taking, literally sewing messages and cross-stitch messaging, and the way they use those is just an incredible process. But what happens during the time that it takes to sew is that you think and you reflect. So you can't rush your message out to somebody and say this because you haven't done it yet. And so you've got to think about it and you refine it all the time. And I'm able to relate that to a project that I'm doing at the moment. So at the start of lockdown, I planted some lettuce, basil, and rocket. So we planted these seeds as an experiment to show, because we introduced growing into classrooms and we use these aeroponic towers. So I wanted to show that aeroponic growing versus growing in soil. So we did this little thing for social media, and it was a little bit of fun. But at the end of it, I decided not to harvest all the crops, but to let them go to seed.
Right.
And to let something go to seed takes time. And so I'm watching this growing taking place every day. And the idea is that when these seeds are ready, they're seeds of hope. And we're going to use these seeds of hope that were grown during lockdown to start sending out message. So certain people are going to receive some of our seeds, and the message is going to be to plant them, but to watch them grow and to reflect and think about what we're trying to achieve, working towards removing hunger as a barrier to learning. And the old me would have banged these seeds out, or wanted to have banged them out weeks and weeks ago, but they're not ready. And every day when I look at them, this idea and this project refines and improves. And that goes back to that good things take time, but with time they get better. So just taking that time and taking the pace out of things is meaning that this project is going to be much more powerful when it gets out there.
Yeah, I think there's a huge step of confidence for people to know that doing things slowly and with deep grace and control is an enormous skill that takes work. Because we practice pace. You know, but you can't go, well, that's doing it properly. Well, you know, watching Roger Federer play a tennis shot that looks like the slowest and easiest shot to play in the world, where he has had milliseconds to make the decision to execute the shot, and he makes it look slow. Watching Eliud Kipchoge break the 2-hour marathon barrier and glide across the line as if he's just starting the run, it takes a huge amount of work to look slow when you're in the thick of doing the stuff that means so much to you. And there's something really powerful about that. And you just, the seeds of hope thing is kind of a really, can you be brilliant at slowly harvesting seeds of hope? Because that's a different performance than creating loads and loads of growth in a short space of time, in a different way. And it's really powerful hearing you talk about that.
I think that one of the things that when sort of preparing for this is, and thinking about all the experiences, about something that's really important to me is giving credit, because you see often people that take credit and they, I did that. For me, what's really important is taking credit, and not taking credit, giving credit. So for me, credit to the people that have helped me on that journey. So the mentors and a particular guy, Steve Cole, who has helped us and sort of challenged us and slowed us down. And he talks about this gun dog that we've got at the side of us as Rethink at the minute, but we're not ready to let it off the lead yet because we've got to wait, we've got to wait, we've got to wait. And that has been sort of really influential within development. But going back to that sort of the credit and the reason why we've got these mentors is the importance of relationships and the importance of networking as well. I'm so passionate about what I do. There was an incident a couple of years ago that I was on my way to a meeting and I spotted Stuart Lancaster, who was in the same hotel, and he was on a phone call. I thought, I'm going to wait, tell him, and to approach him. And again, just trying to tell people about what we do is really important to spread the message. And I waited and I waited, and his phone call kept going and it kept going and it kept going. And it was just like, just waiting to be able to tell that person, because you never know who that person will tell. And to be able to package your message up on that elevator pitch to be able to really impact. But going to meetings and being in a room, and you never know who you're in the room with. So for me, that power of networking has been really, really important. And it's in 2017, I spoke at an all-party parliamentary group in Westminster about school food. And so in that space, somebody was listening, and in lockdown, at the start of lockdown, somebody who'd followed us from that point of view then offered us some financial support as a donation to keep doing some really great stuff. But it had taken from 2017, so 3 years pretty much, for that to happen. And it was about being in that space and being in sort of different times and places and sharing the story, but also listening as well. What's been really important, as well as speaking, for the development of me and also the organization, is listening, because you can find yourself talking all the time, but a lot of the good learning is done during listening. I've just got notebooks upon notebooks where I'll write everything down, and then a year, 2 or 3 years later, a conversation, I'll go, if I go back to that, and I've got that sort of chronology and that sort of journey that you can go back to. But a lot of the good sort of innovation, development, progression of the business has happened during the listening time, and learning from a whole host of different people and places, and reading. I'm a huge sports fan, so I've read a lot of books to do with sport. And I've applied sort of the learnings from sport into sort of my professional career, and that's been interesting to adapt some of those models. But it's always trying to look about how the use and the development of people skills, and reading and learning from things is not always about copying, but sometimes understanding where other people have made mistakes and not quite got it right, and being able to differentiate and to use those within a different setting.
Yeah. I get very bored of all the LinkedIn posts which are about 23 things that amazing people do before breakfast. Just like, yeah, just no. What they do is their business. What they've done is they've worked out that they're going to do something that works for them. Copy working out what works for you, but don't copy what they do. It's that application, the confidence to do that. Because it strikes me as well in terms of the listening stuff and the openness, but also your sense of wanting to make an impact for other people, and have that sort of positive regard from people that are meaningful for you, building that network and having people around you who you want to impress, and then having the confidence to do that sort of really builds on that desire of that you've got really positively. Surround yourself with great people who you want to live up to but want to learn from, and it becomes a really good strong mix, a recognition in there, I guess.
Yeah, and that goes back almost to the earliest point that you said about that knowing then what you know now. And if you knew that it was okay when you got stuck, that it's okay to ask for help, but not asking for help because you can't be bothered to figure it out yourself, because getting stuck and working a way around that is all part of that toolbox thing that I keep referring to. But sometimes when you get stuck, and having the right people to talk to and to talk through that problem with, and I find that when you're talking it through with that trusted person, with the right kind of person, they don't give you the answer. You've got your answer there, you will work through it. But being able to have those conversations with people who have maybe been through similar situations and who can effectively coach, I suppose, you through a situation is really important.
Yeah, yeah. There's a colleague, Duncan Richards from the past. Duncan talks to me about a coaching session practice where you weren't allowed, you were the coach, but you weren't allowed to talk. You just had to nod or make noises. So, and it was a really effective coaching session because the other person, you know, was just starting to tip out stuff and would react and respond to you know, the noise or the lack of noise from the person who was their silent but all-knowing coach. So, you know, it's kind of quite an interesting just way of looking at it. Give people the space to share the answer to then, you know, then build the conversation afterwards.
I think that just sort of tying into that and some of the things we said about that constricting earlier, one of my greatest successes as a coach, as a sports coach, was with my a girls football team, and sort of I took them under 11s, and then under 14s they won the league and cup double, which was just like, it's a mic drop moment. It can't get any better than that. Packing whilst you're doing all right. But when I first started, I really was. They were doing this group of girls were playing football because I was teaching them, and had these drills set up, and they were very unsuccessful. And after reading Phil Jackson, 11 Rings, that there was something in there that sort of said about decision making and empowering people. So traditionally in kids football, you give out the bibs and you decide who's on what team. Something as simple as putting the bibs on the floor and saying, over to you, you make the decision on who goes into that team. And not having practices that I designed, but understanding how they wanted to play football, but using sort of the training sessions to stop, reflect, think about what we've done, why are you going there. And the girls owned their own team, and I was there to sort of provide that sort of overview and the guidance, but they made those decisions, and in training put them in situations where they felt uncomfortable in terms of footballing sort of scenarios, so that they could make those decisions then for themselves. So when it came to a game and they were losing, that I would never scream and shout from the touchlines. It was about them applying what they'd sort of developed within the training into a match situation. And for me, that's probably my greatest sporting achievement is their success, but because I empowered them and they sort of really took that lead, which is really important.
Yeah, and you know, sharing the power and the responsibility, and kind of, you know, and it also becomes much more around the performance rather than the score and the result. You know, and that's a classic one for us. Is, you know, are people really confident enough to go and play the game and make themselves proud by the way that they play, and then you know, see what happens with the score. And typically back to outcome hijack. If you stop worrying so much about, am I going to make the time, and you think about smelling the roses one step at a time sort of through the marathon, you'll probably go pretty fast. If you use the energy of the people around you to bounce off it rather than get distracted by the fact that people are blocking you from your outcome, kind of, you know, shifts things around really sort of quickly. Simple but not easy, all of that stuff. And, you know, from a leadership point of view, being willing to sort of change the power dynamic and do things differently, you learn different stuff. And, you know, I think that's a real strong message that's coming through from everything you do, wanting to change the story for everyone and give them a different part to play in the story. That's coming through loud and clear in everything that you do, whether that's you know, with Rethink Food and what you're doing, or the people who are sort of, you know, benefiting from that, feels really powerful. Is there any last thing for you to reflect on, just in terms of, you know, where you are now with Rethink Food, or sort of any other final reflections that have been useful and come to mind for you through the process?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, Rethink is on its own journey, and sort of we're at a point now where we're looking recruiting people and making sure that we're the kind of employer that we actually really want to be and that we really believe in. So making sure that our decision making process is informed by what we stand for and not to fall down a rabbit hole of doing things because everybody else does it. It's about making sure that we stay true to the core beliefs and that I don't think I've ever done a job. I've never worked. I've just done things that are really natural. And I know that there was a really harsh thing that when I was a deputy head, I was in this office with my head teacher and I was talking about things and I was frustrated. And she said, remember, not everybody cares as much as you do. And that was crippling. That was horrible because until that point, I didn't realize that. And I thought that everybody had this passion. And what we're trying to develop is a place where people can come and work and really live their passion and not work a job, but to do something because it's that meaningful, that's what they are there to do and kind of born to do it, and just really sort of nurturing people and to be able to support people in doing that. And if I think back to the classroom, think even back to sort of being at school myself, encouraging people to believe in themselves and encouraging people to um, work towards their dreams, not blindly heading towards something, but nurture that passion and nurture and always believe in yourself, always believe that you can achieve, and don't be sort of put off by the noise and distractions around you, but really focusing and harnessing that drive and determination to create great things and to do positive things and trying to be a better version of yourself all the time, looking at that self-reflection and self-improvement. So I think there's been a really powerful and sort of development opportunity. Taking part in this session today has been really, really positive. So thank you.
Brilliant, really, really strong. You reminded me of someone who told me that the word vocation comes from the sort of prefix of voca, which means your calling. So it is a calling, a vocation, and that's come through loud and clear. There has been a calling. There's something that's pulled you in, something that purpose-driven. Organizations are talking about purpose-driven all the time at the moment, but are they taking the time to create a really compelling purpose that people can be called into? Because mostly it's about profit, really, and they're sort of just trying to dress it up by reading Simon Sinek and then kind of doing some stuff that says, well, we better have this why thing, hadn't we? Where it's still about shareholder value. It's finding that real purpose calling. So really, really powerful reflection. So thank you for those. There's loads of great stuff in there. We'll certainly continue the conversation and look to support as much as we can in any way that we can beyond today. So thank you. Fantastic stuff. So that brings us to the next baton handover. So having heard about all your great reflections and giving you the opportunity to speak, who would you like to hear from? Who are you handing over to, Nathan, and why?
So having thought about this in some detail, I'd like to hear from Tracy Lynch, who is the Chief Executive of the Greggs Foundation.
Okay.
So as in Greggs the baker. So Greggs in recent years have become a wonderfully successful business, but actually they've been a wonderfully successful business for a long time. And I guess there's that individual story of the Greggs family, which is very interesting. Tracy has worked for Greggs for about 20 years, and part of her journey has been moving into the foundation. And the foundation distribute about £3 million a year, not just through food, not just in sort of the food area, but in a whole host of different sort of areas of need. One of their partnerships is with Premiership Rugby, and that's quite an exciting project that they run. But yeah, as an organisation, they're a great team, and they've just got a really good sort of family feel about the foundation and the positive things that they do. And I know Tracy is a great character, and she'll have some interesting stories about her journey and so the development of the foundation over recent years.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds like a really great next conversation to step into as well. So thank you. That's really, really looking forward to that one. I'll kind of get the homework done between now and then, and we'll look forward to that conversation with Tracy. So so fantastic. Thank you for that, sir. And look, brilliant to have your thoughts and your reflections here today. All of the best with sort of, making sure that hunger is removed as a barrier to learning, and certainly through the work that we do at believeperform.com, anything that we can do to help push that message out there as well, we'll be doing that as well. So inspiring to hear that. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for those who are listening and who follow up and watch the recording as well. Do get involved and do help Nathan and the team out. I'm sure they would welcome any sort of support that they can get from any of you who have been inspired by what he's had to say. So have a safe weekend, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Go well, everyone, and see you all next week for leg 10. Thank you very much. Take care.